morning and a warm welcome to our first inaugural session of the second India-Japan Forum. It is my pleasure to welcome Minister Hayashi and Minister Jaishankar, and thank you both for making time to be here and to kick us off this morning. The India-Japan relationship is special, and we can only testify to that by just looking at the room here today. But also, as Mr. Das said, the effort that has gone into making this relationship what it is and getting it out of governments to all of us who are all invested in this particular relationship. I will now request Minister Hayashi to make his opening remarks, followed by Minister Jaishankar.
Thank you, Chair, and namaskar, good morning. Thank you, Ms. Indrani Baguchi, CEO of this great Ananta Center, for your kind introduction. And also my friend Jay, Minister Jaishankar, let me also thank you for your generous hospitality every time we met. It is a great honor and privilege to be given the opportunity today to address the India-Japan Forum, which holds great significance for our bilateral relations, as Chairman already reiterated. 2023 is a crucial year in which both of our nations hold presidencies of the G7 and G20, respectively. Prime Minister Kishida and Prime Minister Modi agreed that they would work closely together during Prime Minister Kishida's visit here in March. Soon after that, we welcomed the Prime Minister Modi at the G7 Hiroshima summit in May. Since taking office as Japanese Foreign Minister 2 years ago, November, I myself have enjoyed working closely and personally with Minister Jaishankar. We have either held or attended 6 meetings together in person around the world, in Tokyo, here in New Delhi, New York, and also Melbourne so far. This doesn't include the numerous times we have bumped into each other at the fringes of international conferences. While I highly admire Minister Jaishankar as a grand strategist, I really enjoy my personal interactions with him, as he is very, very generous enough to laugh at my endless Beatles joke each and every single time. So, Jay, I would like to ask that you will keep that patience for me today too. So I would like to highlight 2 key points. One is how to pass on the outcomes of the G7 Hiroshima summit to the G20 New Delhi summit. Second is how to develop Japan-India relations further, bearing in mind Japan's new plan for a free and open Indo-Pacific, or FOIP, which Prime Minister Kishida announced here in Delhi back in March. Allow me to move to my first point. The G7 Hiroshima summit was a historic meeting where we addressed various difficult challenges the world is facing at this turning point in history. Let me bring up the significance of engagement with partners beyond the G7. Bearing in mind that developing and emerging countries are raising their profiles in the global arena, Japan, as the G7 presidency, emphasized the strengthening of engagement with the so-called Global South at the G7 Hiroshima summit this year. This is guided by our conviction that unless we keenly listen to the voices of the Global South and show our commitment to cooperation on urgent issues facing these countries, our appeal for upholding the free and open international order based on the rule of law may sound like a mere slogan. Prime Minister Modi also emphasized the importance of giving a chance to the Global South to raise their voices at the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting in March. After the G7 Hiroshima summit, the G7 held discussions with 8 invited countries, including India, and there were various tangible outcomes. In particular, the leaders of the G7 and the invited countries confirmed to strengthen cooperation on global challenges, including food, development, health, energy and climate change, and the environment. These global challenges cannot be overcome by the G7 alone. They also reaffirmed their strong commitment to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Regarding food security, which has been deteriorating due to Russia's aggression against Ukraine, the G7 and invited countries together issued the Hiroshima Action Statement for Resilient Global Food Security. In addressing such global challenges, the G20, which brings together the most influential countries of the Global South, is particularly important. So coordination with India, the G20 presidency, is critical as your nation hosted the Voice of Global South Summit back in January. At the G7 Hiroshima Summit, Prime Minister Modi called for concrete actions to address imminent global challenges. I would like to underscore that these are in line with the outcomes of the G7 Hiroshima Summit, and Japan supports India's various initiatives. Let me take this opportunity to express our government's appreciation to Prime Minister Modi for the valuable inputs for the success of the Hiroshima Summit. Ladies and gentlemen, let me briefly touch upon a few more examples of Japan's support to India's G20 presidency. Regarding the environment, the concept of lifestyle for environment, introduced by Prime Minister Modi, which asks everyone to live a life that is in tune with us, resonates well with our government's policy. Japan is also working on several projects as part of ushering in behavioral change aimed for decarbonization. This demonstrates our shared recognition that the change in the lifestyles of the people is really key to decarbonization. Another global challenge that I would like to highlight is food security. We commend India's leadership in advancing efforts that pertain to building resilient and sustainable agriculture and food system, such as launching the millet and other ancient grains international research initiative, Hayashi. We made sure that such efforts by India were included in the Hiroshima Action Statement for Resilient Global Food Security. There are just a few examples of a multifaceted and wide-ranging cooperation, and Japan is very much eager to continue working hand in hand with India towards the success of the G20 New Delhi Summit. Ladies and gentlemen, another aspect that Japan emphasized at the G7 Hiroshima Summit is to uphold a free and open international order based on the rule of law. The leaders of the G7 invited countries including India and Ukraine discussed the peace and stability of the world and agreed on the point that unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force cannot be tolerated anywhere in the world. They also agreed on the significance of the rule of law and the principles of the United Nations Charter. At a time when there were many pressing challenges, including Russia's aggression against Ukraine, Japan and India fully share the necessity to lead the world to cooperation rather than to division and confrontation. The free and open international order based on the rule of law is the key to realizing such a world. To elaborate on this concept, free means country, each country is free to make decisions based on its own sovereignty. The rule of law is essential for countries to enjoy such freedom. And open means respect for principles including inclusiveness, openness, and diversity. It is vital that we refrain from imposing barriers or excluding certain countries. This concept is especially crucial for smaller countries. In coordination with India, Japan intends to materialize such concept through realizing a free and open Indo-Pacific, or FOIP. In March this year, Prime Minister Kishida announced Japan's new plan for FOIP here in New Delhi. This fact itself is a reflection of the critical importance Japan places on India. As your nation is an indispensable partner in achieving FOIP, a free and open Indo-Pacific. Moreover, the efforts to achieve FOIP expands beyond our collaboration with India, but to the whole South Asia region. This new plan makes clear that South Asia is one of the key regions and concrete efforts have been taking place. In April, we welcomed Prime Minister Hasina from Bangladesh to Japan, and the two Prime Ministers agreed to promote cooperation for FOIP. Prime Minister Kishida laid out the plan for the industrial value chain concept, which aims to improve the connectivity of the entire Bay of Bengal region, and expressed his desire to create synergies by organically linking corporations under the Bay of Bengal Industrial Growth Belt, Big B, initiative with the development of the northeastern region of India. Relating to the northeastern region of India, which I mentioned, which I understand is a priority of Prime Minister Modi himself, Japan has extended support for the development of the region, including through the Japan-India Act East Forum. Going forward, Japan will continue to contribute to the development of the northeastern region of India by promoting such projects as the Northeast Road Network Connectivity Improvement Project to enhance the connectivity in the region. I will be visiting Sri Lanka and the Maldives this weekend. There, I intend to promote concrete cooperation between Japan and these countries as well. I believe that we can together create synergies across this great region. Let us now come back to our bilateral ties with India. Here, allow me to cite Mr. Jaishankar's book, The India Way, in which he describes Japan-India relations as the most natural strategic equation in Asia. I perfectly share his view, and we believe that close coordination with India is key to bringing peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific at large. In that vein, Japan intends to drive forward our cooperation in all areas to expand our special strategic and global partnership with India. Allow me to elaborate. The frequent and multi-layered high-level contacts have been the backbone of Japan-India relations. High-level exchanges have acted as the driving force to push forward our security and defense cooperation. We have conducted defense exercises on land, at sea, and in the air including the first ever joint fighter exercise in January. The agreement between the government of Japan and the government of the Republic of India concerning reciprocal provision of supplies and services between the self-defense forces of Japan and Indian armed forces. It sounds a little bit long, but in short, AXA, is being utilized for these exercises. We see progresses on cooperative initiatives in new realms, including cyber and space, where discussions at the working level are being carried out. Discussions toward the realization of substantial cooperation in the areas of defense equipment and technology are also underway. The outlook for collaboration in the economic field is promising. Prime Minister Modi has placed economic growth as one of his top priority agendas and has promoted various economic initiatives, including Make in India, Digital India, and Clean India. As a measure to promote investment, Prime Minister Modi has identified 15 key sectors, including telecommunications equipment, automobiles, and applied chemical batteries that are eligible for subsidies. All of this have led to the remarkable growth in Japanese investment into critical technologies, such as medical equipment, electronics, and household electric appliances. So we have been encouraging Japanese companies to increase investment in India. For example, Prime Minister Kishida set the 5 trillion yen target of public and private investment and financing from Japan to India. In the next 5 years from 2022, at the same time, we will work together with the Indian government to effectively address the difficulties that Japanese companies face in the Indian market. Ladies and gentlemen, last month, Japan revised its Development Cooperation Charter, which is our basic document on development cooperation. The new charter will enable Japan to better address development challenges we face, including food and energy, climate change, and digital transformation. Under this revised charter, we will continue to undertake efforts to build quality infrastructure in India, including the high-speed rail and urban transportations. Let me briefly elaborate on the high-speed rail project, which is the flagship project between Japan and India. By introducing Japanese bullet train Shinkansen technologies, this project will connect Mumbai to Ahmedabad at a distance of approximately 500 kilometers and is expected to improve the efficiency of transportation as well as promote economic development in area along the high-speed rail. We truly hope that the completion of this high-speed rail will enable India to achieve further economic growth. Ladies and gentlemen, to expand the breadth and depth of our bilateral relationship, it is crucial that we promote people-to-people exchange. As we are now in the post-COVID-19 era, this is an opportune time to revitalize various exchanges, such as today. Our Prime Ministers agreed to further promote exchanges at the summit meeting held in March. We designated this year, 2023, as the Japan-India Tourism Exchange Year, and we will bolster tourism. Japan and India will also promote Japanese language education, student exchanges, and the specified skilled worker system. We will cooperate to bring human resources from India to Japan, especially in the IT field. Last but not least, we will continue to cooperate through international organizations and multilateral frameworks. India is an integral partner for us in terms of the United Nations Security Council reform, where we have been working shoulder to shoulder as G4 members to achieve concrete results. We have also promoted practical cooperation in a wide range of fields through the Quad. In closing, I would like to reflect on some of the memorable moments of the G7 Hiroshima Summit. India elected Mahatma Gandhi's bust as a gift to the city of Hiroshima. Prime Minister Modi and Mayor Matsui of the city of the Hiroshima personally attended the unveiling of the bust. This was widely covered by the Japanese media. This gift is indeed a symbol that Japan and India are united in their steps towards peace. The leaders of the world visited the Peace Memorial Museum and deepened their understanding of the reality of the use of nuclear weapons. The leaders left comments in the guest book that reflected their reaffirmed determination to achieve a world without nuclear weapons. Prime Minister Modi described his visit to the museum as an emotional experience afterwards. And Japan is fully committed to the success of the G20 New Delhi Summit. The theme of India's G20 presidency is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or One Earth, One Family, One Future. Prime Minister Modi, in explaining the meaning of this theme, stated that we need to break away from zero-sum thinking and called for harmony among humankind as well as with planet Earth. The meaning of G20's theme is in line with the principles of Japan's FOIP, which strives for fostering cooperation at a time of deepening division and confrontations. We really look forward to continuing to work side by side with India in the spirit of harmony and cooperation for a better future of the region and beyond. I thank you for your kind attention. Dhanyavad.
May I now invite Minister Jaishankar to deliver his opening remarks.
Minister Hayashi, Indrani Bakchi, ladies and gentlemen, Shubh Prabhat, Ohayo gozaimasu, good morning. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you, and what I would like to do is really make 3 comments on preceding speakers and 6 points of my own. The 3 comments I have, I'll start with Mr. Tarun Das. I'd like to remind him that actually it was Japan where we first met, which brought us together as well. It brought me together with other people, but with you, I remember 1997, and Japan coming in as a partner country for the annual CII event. So when I think of India-Japan relationship, for me, you are very, very central to it, and I'm so happy today that we continue to have your leadership and guidance. To my friend Yoshi, we enjoy our Beatles conversation, but I'm still not quite sure whether he is John Lennon or Paul McCartney. But I think he thinks, because of the India Association, that I'm George Harrison. So I think it's a subject of continuing conversation. And my third comment, I really, Minister, valued what you said. I listened very carefully. And I would say, particularly the point you made about the explanation for, a free and open Indo-Pacific, what is the thinking behind it, is something I found very, very thought-provoking. So now let me come to comments on my own. What really does Japan mean to Indians? And what does it mean, therefore, for the relationship? the first point I would make is for India, and I think not just for India, for many Asian countries. Japan is in many ways the exemplar modernizer. That it was Japan's effort to modernize and progress and industrialize in the 19th century, which actually became a trendsetter, which, obviously every country then followed in their particular moment, in their particular way. But it is still something which is very much, I would say, an example of relevance. In fact, whether in India, across the political spectrum, this is something which is widely appreciated. It's also a country for which actually there is a lot of goodwill from history. So we view history as a tailwind, not as a headwind. That is something which I think our Japanese friends need to appreciate. And they need to appreciate it because today, under Prime Minister Modi, we also have a great modernization effort. I mean, if I were to actually pick a single word description for the Prime Minister, I would actually use the word modernizer more than anything else. The idea of what we call Atmanirbhar Bharat, a self-reliant India, and India that is very nurturing of its culture, which can harmonize its tradition, modernity. I think a lot of Japanese can and should relate to it. So that is my first point, that Japan as an exemplar, Japan in a way as an influence, and Japan therefore as a natural partner in this modernizing India, which is also very much more confident about its culture and traditions. My second point, the impact of Japan on India. I think Japan has truly unleashed a number of revolutions in this country. There is the Maruti revolution, where it wasn't just the Suzuki car coming in. It wasn't only about a car coming in. It was a way, actually, it was an entire lifestyle, it was a thinking, it was an industrial culture which got changed. The second revolution was the metro revolution. I think it's had a very profound impact on the urban infrastructure of India. The third revolution is in the making, which is the high-speed rail. So I think when we complete that project, people will see in India, what a enormous ripple impact it has. Again, well beyond the world of railways and movement of people, that it actually has a transformational impact on the economy, on real estate, on mobility, even on social habits of people. And the fourth revolution which I see on the horizon, which is emerging and critical technologies and semiconductor sphere, where again I do believe that there is a huge potential for us to work on. If you put them all cumulatively, I think Japan's had a very powerful impact actually on manufacturing in India, on our urbanization process, on the organization of logistics in this country, and as Minister Hayashi pointed out, also has been a source of support in the Northeast, and that's one area, not just in the Northeast, but beyond the Northeast to neighboring countries. It's something that we hope to develop further. So, while recognizing this, I think my advice to our Japanese friends here would be that you are also witnessing a maturing, or I would say an India with greater capacities. So the relationship has to be far more collaborative than before. It will have to localize much more in India, we will have to keep changing with times if we are to keep expanding the relationship. My third point, the foreign policy point. If I were to look back at the convergence of the last 25 years, to me the convergence happened because you had a Japan which was desirous of stepping out into the world. And in India, which was actually looking east and acting east. And India moves much more out of its traditional comfort zone further east. Japan moves out of its comfort zone into the world and further west. And I think that's where the big intersection in a way has happened. And bear in mind that each in their own way were also globalizing. And today, when Minister Hayashi speaks about Bangladesh, or yesterday we had a discussion about Sri Lanka, and that is where he is going from here. We find today ability and interest and inclination to work with Japan in a number of third countries. I think when I look at Japanese policies and goals and Indian policies and goals, I think in many ways they are at least converging, in many ways actually supporting each other. And I think this today is a very important aspect of our relationship. My fourth point pertains to the Indo-Pacific and the Quad. I think the Minister, as I said, in a very thought-provoking way, analyzed the concept of how Indo-Pacific is described. But I would like to step back and really underline the point of history, which is that the Indo and the Pacific got really separated in 1945. It got separated because the dominance of the United States actually put the Pacific into a particular spotlight, because you had the Japan relationship, you had the events in China in the late 40s, you had the Korean War, you had the Vietnam War. So what happened was that became for the United States a theater all by itself. And today, as the world is globalizing, as the US itself feels the need to look for more partners, we are seeing the return to history, that the natural seamlessness between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, I think is today creating what is increasingly accepted concept of Indo-Pacific. In fact, I was very happy that at the East Asia Summit this time, that there was, all the countries today recognized the validity of the Indo-Pacific. And in regard to the Quad, again, it's important to look at the Quad not in traditional terms, in orthodox terms, because very often, particularly the analytical world, is a very habituated world, that they apply old templates to new situations. So to me, Quad is the ability for countries in alliances to keep their alliances, but to look beyond alliances. And it is this, I would say, leap of strategic imagination, which actually the leaders and the governments of Quad have shown, and to the analysts in the room, I hope that you too would match our openness of mind. My fifth point, the future of the international order. The big challenge, really, the unknown world we are moving into. People describe it artificial intelligence, quantum, etc. But in many ways, it's a world, it's actually the term knowledge economy and captures a lot of that. So if I were to look at four big characteristics of the era that we are poised to enter, which is the need to build resilient and reliable supply chains. 2, the need to ensure trust and transparency when it comes to digital domain. 3, the need to uphold political democratic values and market economy. And 4, address the demographic challenge which the world is going to face, which is where the demand is not where the demographics is. And how do you synthesize these two? If I were to put these 4 as the primary characteristics of the world we are entering into, I would say that India, Japan are indeed natural partners, because I think these are 4 very powerful reasons for us to work. Finally, I would highlight to all of you, and again I'm building on a point which Minister Hayashi made about the people to people. But I think, I travel a fair amount in India. I visit a lot of universities. I meet a lot of young people. I want to say really they find Japan very fascinating. Today, if Japanese culture, Japanese language, Japanese food, really Japanese aesthetics is enormously appealing to the younger generations of India. So yesterday in our own talks we had a discussion how to increase the number of students. We also, I made the point that we need to think much more of online interactions because that is very much today a natural medium for young Indians to communicate and to actually relate. And that is something we need to build on. So if I were to sum up these remarks, I would say today, whether it is the future of the international order, whether it is strategy, whether it is economics, whether it's technology, whether it is culture, or indeed whether it's history or geography, I think India and Japan have a lot going for each other. And I very much hope that a forum of people who are so invested in this relationship that in the course of the next 2 days, you will be able to develop this further and strengthen us in the government as we proceed with this approach. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Minister Jaishankar, and thank you, Minister Hayashi. And it is now my privilege to put you through the grind. Before we open up to questions from the floor. Minister Hayashi, and I will address most of the questions to both of you because there are two different perspectives. Minister Hayashi, Japan's new national security strategy has been read and has been commented upon. In your view, where does India fit in this strategy?
Thank you so much. As we already talked at the podium, this region, the South Asia, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, these are the very key area in the Indo-Pacific. So that's why also our national strategies immediate concern or threat is Russia, North Korea, and China as a challenge. But cooperation between this area, especially with India, are really important to have a FOIP realized, and to realize all these FOIP concept is really the stabilizing key to all in the Pacific area.
Minister Jaishankar, is when you craft India's national security strategy, even if it is not documented, where and how would you put Japan in it?
For us, no question, it is one of the really major important relationships. I think there was always a bilateral case for it. Where that has gathered more pace is in the last decade. We have taken a lot of concepts and good intentions and made it on the ground into practical achievements or practical steps in progress. But there's also today the larger relevance, the Indo-Pacific relevance, I would say the global relevance. That Japan would be among the countries with whom we would have affinity, we would have a degree, high degree of trust, that a lot of our interests are convergent. So both bilaterally and regionally, internationally, and aspirationally. I mean, we are countries who want to change. If you look at a multipolar world, if you're looking at better representation, a more democratic representation in the UN Security Council, I think you would see Japan is a partner in pretty much everything we're doing.
Thank you. Minister Hayashi, just to go back to what you just said about North Korea and China being challenges that we should address. In our part of the world, we see another challenge, which is extremism, radicalism, and terrorism crossing borders. And so if you were to look at this particular challenge, and we see this challenge not only around India, but beyond our borders, and I do believe that none of us are free from the threat of this particular challenge. How would you address this?
It's an unquestionable issue that everybody, India, Japan, everybody should be very strict vis-a-vis all those activities such as terrorism, and to stop all those each country should be ready for that, but cooperation between like-minded countries like us to counter terrorism is the top priority issues.
Thank you. Minister Jaishankar, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I'd put it more in terms of issues. I think there's some really important issues in the world, challenges in the world, like missile nuclear proliferation and terrorism. And I think it's important that we address the root causes and the root countries which are behind this. And it's important here that Japan and India are on the same page.
Thank you very much. And both of you spoke about Japan and India cooperating in the larger South Asian region. Minister Hayashi, you spoke about the South Asian region as being a key focus of both your the larger foreign policy, but as well as the Indo-Pacific policy. And we've seen India and Japan working together very closely in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, certainly. How would you describe your policy towards South Asia? To South Asia.
Oh, okay.
And to Minister Jaishankar, how would you describe India's policy in the Northeast Asia?
Thank you. Like I said, the first question, we and the South Asian countries have traditionally enjoyed very friendly relations and very important partners. And like Mr. Jaishankar says, since 1945, that natural, seamless Indo-Pacific is a little bit ceased, temporarily, I would say. But now we are back. We are going west and then you are going east. So this natural cooperation between the South Asia and the East Asia are for the very key cooperation in realizing free and open Indo-Pacific FOIP. That's what I said. So that's why the Japanese government is setting the concept of FOIP and for stability and peace and prosperity in this area. And then those prosperity are coming from peace and stability, and then prosperity further strengthens the peace and stability. And so it's this good chain reaction between two very important, and we have a natural potential to realize all those FOIP.
I'd say in regard to Northeast Asia, in fact to the Indo-Pacific, to that part of the Indo-Pacific, we need today to be aware of how invested we are, how much our stakes have grown really in that region. Our economic stakes, our strategic stakes in a way. So for us today, the stability of that region is absolutely crucial. There's one part of it is of course individual relationship, and as I said, the Japan-India relationship is an exceptionally strong one with an enormous potential. But I think there's the larger issue of why it is necessary for, in global interest, really to have stability in that part of the world.
The Quad brings the two countries together in a very different way. And I see that the Quad is adding more and more technology sectors under its ambit, literally writing the rules of the road for global technology governance as we go along. But we also see more bilateral, trilateral arrangements within the Quad, AUKUS being one of them. Does it affect the future of the Quad? And to both of you, what do you see the Quad doing in the next couple of years?
The Quad is, like you mentioned, is an effort by the four countries which shares a vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific to promote the practical cooperation in the Indo-Pacific to realize this vision. So, as a force for good, we're going to cooperate in the peace and stability, and also on the prosperity. So, four countries' cooperations, we agreed on that the last May's summit meeting, that climate change, international health issues, infrastructures, important technologies, cyber space, and oceans, so many areas that we can cooperate. So again, I would like to emphasize that these cooperation will further help the areas of peace and stability that is basically based on those cooperations.
Indrani, one, of course, within the Quad, the more we work together, the more comfortable we get, there's more we can do. Whether members of the Quad, not all of them, but 3 of them or any smaller number, decide to embark on something, that is their choice. You know, after all, if our whole idea is that the entire region should be free to have its choices, that applies as much within the Quad as outside the Quad. So I think that's a choice which is for them to exercise. But future of Quad, I would say I'm really very optimistic. I feel, in fact, if you look at the last, we restarted it in 2017. Yes. Okay, every 6 months people pronounced it dead, and every time it reincarnated stronger and stronger. Okay, so my issue here is, if you look practically, you know, today you have critical and emerging technologies, you have a maritime domain awareness, you have HADR, SOPs for HADR. So every meeting of the Quad is actually deepening the agenda. It is giving us many more issues to work on, and I feel after every meeting that actually there are many more ideas about where we're going. So I am today, frankly, very validated that this new way of working, you know, which, as I said, you know, very flexible, very open-minded, there are a lot of give and take. This is the way to go. This is how actually the future, certainly of important relationships are going to go. They're not going to go by 1945, 1950 type alliance analysis.
India and Japan just signed an agreement on semiconductors, semiconductor cooperation and critical minerals. Neither of us are big manufacturers of semiconductors. What does this agreement mean for both of us, and how do you want to put it on the ground?
Not only India has a big market, but you have a great people, especially in the IT field. So that's why the Japanese industry, especially in semiconductor industries, are really interested in cooperation with India. So in that regards, that is very natural and very meaningful and very important to cooperate with Japan and India for in the area of the semiconductor. So that's the backdrops that last week's Minister Nishimura's and also Minister Vaishnava started up the partnership. So this is not G2G only, but including all those people from the industries. So in that way, that will be helping the already strong industries to realize more potentials in the future.
Two quick points there. I think the Indian market and co-production are going to get more closely linked with the passage of time, and I think it's important for everybody in business to understand that. Specifically on the semiconductors, we came out of the American visit with three very important agreements. One with Micron for assembly and testing, one with Applied Materials for an engineering center, one with LAM for training of people. So I can see, frankly, in the next few years, actually a very substantial development in the semiconductor mission. We are dead serious about it. We are prepared to invest, in accordance with that seriousness. So I'm pretty sure that this particular area will become a very crucial meeting place between Indian and Japanese industry.
I'm going to open it up for questions. Please, there are mics, standing mics. Please use them. But before I let you loose on the rest of the room, I have an important trivia question. To both of you, what is your favorite film, food, and historical personality that you like in each other's countries? Minister, each other's countries.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your great questions. And I was so impressed in the coming flight from Tokyo to Delhi yesterday. I saw the great movie called RRR.
No.
So I really enjoyed that. And so last night I enjoyed the curry. But now in Tokyo there's so many Indian restaurants. And my favorite nowadays is biryani. So, the favorite star is from that RRR. There were two guys.
Who do the national
two do. But I prefer to say who's Rao Jr. Yeah, because
Ramcharan
Jr. Because he seems like a little bit close to me. He seems
you,
like
you look very similar.
No. Yeah, like this. So. And of course, Mahatma Gandhi is my hero, and I'm going to his museum this afternoon. So I'm really looking forward to that.
We're going to put that RRR to the test before you step down.
Okay, I'm not dancing with him. Let me be very clear there. So your first question was movie, right?
Yes.
Look, I watch a lot of Japanese movies, but I actually would pick probably a serial. There's a serial many of you would have seen, Japanese would know, Shinya Shokudo. It's called Tokyo Diner. So I'm that's something which I very much enjoyed. It's also, by the way, a film about food. So it kind of comes to your second question, what would I like most about Japanese food? I would probably say something called Kimpira Gobo. But only the Japanese in the room know what gobo is. It's a long route which is only available in Japan. So anybody from Japan who comes and presents me with gobo, I will happily accept it. So that's a hint for future visits. Which figure in history? Look, if you look at Japanese history, they're in fact very fascinating individuals. But I would probably pick somebody from Japan who is relevant today to what we are doing. There is a person called Iwakura Tomomi. He is very famous because he led a mission around the world to collect what today we would call best practices. And he took global best practices to Japan, and the Japan which modernized actually harvested those good practices. So to me, when I look at foreign policy, one important part of foreign policy is actually to go around the world collecting best practices and then bringing it home and trying to see how can the system actually absorb it and implement it.
Thank you both, and we will be deprived of the sight of the two of you dancing, but I see questions on the floor. Please, introduce yourself if you could. And
okay. Thank you very much. Hiro Akita from Nikkei, Tokyo. So please allow me to ask a journalistic question because I'm a journalist. And I understand that the peacetime collaboration between India and Japan is very, very close. But my question is about the wartime cooperation. And because the partnership will be really tested in time of war or crisis. So specifically, my questions to both, to Mr. Jaishankar, what kind of collaboration would India can possibly do in the case of war in Taiwan Strait? What would be the option for India to collaborate with Japan? And for Mr. Hayashi, similarly, if there were to be a war or conflict in the Indo-Pacific or at the border of Indo and China, what kind of support Japan can provide, just in addition to diplomatic support or economic support, but something else? Thank you.
Yeah?
go ahead.
You know, I fundamentally disagree with your question. I disagree with your question because I think it is actually the peacetime cooperation which is when you are tested. Because if you don't work every day to build a relationship and to put in place capabilities and comfort and your structures, then when something more severe comes, if I can't handle a good day, how will I handle a difficult day? So I think the way you have put it does not appeal to me very honestly. I would say for us really the challenge is that we work every day in every possible way to strengthen our cooperation, whether it's in economics, whether it's in supply chain, whether it's in the digital domain, whether it's in critical technologies, and also in maritime security, or in more than maritime security. If you do all of this, I would say you are contributing to the strengthening of peace and stability and security. So many of worse fears do not happen if you actually work ahead of it. So that would be my answer to you.
Yeah, I really love to say I disagree with your question, but since you're the Japanese reporter, I don't use that words. But like I said at my speech, we're already doing some cooperation in the security fields, such as exercise on land and at sea, and in the air, including the first ever jointed fighter exercise in January. And so those are the preparation that Jay also touching upon. And on the top of that, the economic cooperation and the future cooperation on those people-to-people exchange all goes into more stable and more strengthening, strong relationship between two. And on the top of that, there's a defense cooperation, and that will be working against any of those scenarios you mentioned are happening in the future.
Thank you. Please.
Tatsuya Teruzawa, Chairman of the Institute of Energy Economics Japan. I have a question to Mr. Jaishankar. This year, India is the chair for the G20. What would you like to achieve through this year's G20? And how would you like to have this year's G20 to be remembered? And to be more specific, looking at the G7 summit meeting in Hiroshima, looking at the achievements of the G7 meeting, what aspects or achievements of the G7 of this year in Hiroshima would you like to build upon? And do you find areas or perspectives in the G7 which you find weak or not fully being addressed? Which are the areas that you want to add on to the G7 achievements?
Thank you. There were many aspects for the G7. I'll start from the later part of the question. The one which we associated ourselves most closely, including in an outcome statement, was one relating to food security. Because today, food security or food insecurity is actually a very, very crucial issue. And I fear that the direction of developments is such that it will become more complicated, not less, with the passage of time. So we commend the G7 for their efforts in this regard. We associate ourselves with it, and certainly we would like to bring that into the G20 deliberations. Regarding the G20 itself, what are we trying to do? Look, what was the mandate of the G20? The mandate of the G20 was to promote global growth and development. It's important that we keep the focus on that mandate. That mandate is particularly crucial because if you look at the last few years, you already had autonomously, I would say, a lot of financial stress in the world. Then came COVID, which was devastating, but particularly devastating for the developing world. Then you have the Ukraine conflict, the energy consequences, the food consequences, the fertilizer consequences. You have countries today very worried about their debt. Now, we had given some relief to the LDCs, but you have today, Sri Lanka, for example, is not an LDC, it's a middle income country. So, for me today, how do I address the economic needs of much of the world? Because it's very important for the G20 to understand, in the pursuit of an East-West, I would say, East-West contradiction, or a East-West division of in the world, they should not end up creating a bigger North-South problem. So we need today to look at debt, we need to look at reform of multilateral development banks, we need to look at how do you actually support a whole lot of economies who are going through this period. We need to look at food, but and we need to look at green financing, because we keep talking about climate change, climate action, but where's the money? So these are really very, very, to my mind, really the crucial issues. In addition, of course, we will be putting forward concepts like women-led development, or the whole millets, the lifestyle for environment. I think these will be some of our important messages as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I?
Ken, please, last question. Yeah.
My name is Ken Jimbo from Keio University in Japan. With Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States last month, the both countries have come up with impressive list of cooperation, especially on the defense domain that involves the joint development of the fighter engines and provision of the unmanned system to India. So my question to Minister Jaishankar is that whether the strategic realignment with the United States is underway in India. If so, that to what extent that you think that the future of the India-US relationship, and follow-up question to that, as India is cultivating its own defense industrial base in a much robust manner, there will be a room for the Japan-India defense industry cooperation. I also like to have your view on this.
You are right that two important outcomes from the Prime Minister's visit. One was the agreement between GE Aerospace and a company called HAL for the manufacture in India of the GE 414 engine. The other was the plan to acquire high altitude UAVs from the United States and to have them initially assembled in India, and also an MRO for their upkeep. And these are important steps. But bear in mind, it was not we who had a problem in dealing with the United States on military equipment. It was the United States which actually hesitated to supply us for many, many years. And it was thanks to the nuclear deal and what happened thereafter that this possibility became unlocked. We have always been open to getting the best possible option for our military requirements. We have tradition of actually global sourcing. So if you look at the Indian military, you will see Russian, you will see French, you will see Israeli, you will see American, of course, you see some Korean today. So there is a very, very broad sourcing here. what does it mean for India and Japan? I think, the Minister and I discussed it yesterday. Today, when we speak about Make in India, that Make in India applies very much to the defense sector. As I said, Indian market today is very much influenced by Indian co-production. So the more we are able to partner and deepen collaboration in India, I think the possibilities will grow. So I think, to my mind, there is a lot of room here really for Japanese companies in the defense area to look. We have 2 defense corridors in this country, one in the north, one in the south. So yesterday, in fact, I invited the minister. I said that, look, we would be very interested in engaging Japanese companies who would like to come in various spheres. It doesn't have to be necessarily a platform. There are in industry a whole range of options out there. But to me, that would be the one more step in the evolution of our relationship. I don't know if you would like to add to that.
Just one quick comment on that. As we decided in the last December's national security strategy, we are now in the process of reviewing our 3 principles for defense equipment transitions. So that's in accordance with what you are already describing. So that in that backdrops we've been discussing last night about possibility in the industry of defense industries cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask?
Sure. Absolutely the last question.
First of all, Honorable Ministers, it's really a pleasure to hear you articulate your views about not only the interaction between 2 countries, but 2 ancient cultures. The collaboration also extends much in the business side, as you articulated. In line with government's vision of making India for the world, I'm Deepak Shetty, I'm CEO, Managing Director, JCB. In line with the government's focus on making India for the world, I want to mention we proudly export to 130 countries around the world. Now, the backhoe loaders, which are one of the mainstays, majority of the components are manufactured locally. But for our excavators, I'm very proud to mention almost 30% components come from Japan. Now, when we interact with the larger companies like Kawasaki-san or Itochu, they are keen to invest in India. But the smaller companies which are in Japan, they are still not looking at India as a base for manufacturing the components. I would also like to mention that India today is the 3rd largest construction equipment market in the world. So there is a huge market here locally. There is an export opportunity. Would you consider a special mission so that some hand-holding is done for the smaller companies who presently look at setting up facilities either in Yantai or in Ulsan, Busan, rather than looking at India? And we then reluctantly have to buy components from across the northern border, which probably we would not be very keen to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shetty. Absolutely the last
Very quick ones. There's a big potential for small and medium-sized Japanese companies to come here and cooperate with the Indian side and also utilize this big market. And maybe compared to the bigger companies, they need some assistance and information sharing. So that's why I understand that former Prime Minister Suga came here together with many other industrial people, but also institutions like JETRO and all those counterparts in here welcome to push those potential in the future.
Do you want to add the last bit?
No, I just want to say that I think it's a very good point you flagged, but it's not something where the responsibility is entirely on the government, though we'd be happy to take our share of it. I think business too has to find ways of attracting more of their businesses from counterpart economies, because at the end of the day, if I were a Japanese business person, I would actually ask an Indian business person what the investment climate is, rather than go entirely by what the Indian government says. So I see great value in the business-to-business exchanges, and certainly we would make a special effort as we try to take our relationship to the next level to promote that.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister Jaishankar, and thank you, Minister Hayashi. We are out of time. I presume we have a lot more questions to ask you. But thank you both very much, and have a great day.